Hey everyone. I've decided against doing any more videos on Fernieboy for now. It's shaping up to be a really busy week in the shop and it's very hot and I just don't have the energy in me. So it's also been a little bit disruptive because I spent a bunch of time combing through his videos and doing small snippets here and there. And I'd really actually like to, hopefully this coming weekend, get back to focusing on what I've already promised. But before I sort of abandon that for now, what I did want to do is make a couple of the last points that I thought were important with regards to his video on Cool Hard Logic Exposed, as he says. The first is, and I've already touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to expand on it a bit, is this whole issue of trolling, about the atheists trolling these poor Christian YouTubers and how he's going to block everybody and that sort of thing. I suppose, you know, if a person hadn't made videos filled with hate against, railing against gays and lesbians, they might have a leg to stand on. If a person didn't constantly threaten hell and damnation and eternal torment on people, they might have a leg to stand on when it comes to trolling. And if a person hadn't trolled themselves, that might go a long way towards that. So I just wanted to point that out. I think it's a little passive-aggressive, actually, to be crying and whining about trolling when you've had videos removed from YouTube because they contained hate speech against a particular group. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is his notion that we're dealing with angles of far less than 1 degree, as if that somehow debunks the argument or makes the calculations in error. As you can see, I'm an automotive mechanic by trade, and I constantly deal with measurements that are far less, and that would be the telephone. Damn it. Well, that ended up being quite the telephone conversation. Not only was it an interruption, but it was a guy with a Far East accent telling me that he was calling from Microsoft Windows to help me with my computer. Oh, goodness. I usually string those guys along and play with them for a while and let them give their spiel out, and then finally after 10 minutes or so I tell them I only use Apple computers or something along those lines. And then they get upset at me and get mad at me and tell me that I've been wasting their time. How ironic. This guy instead got a real earful from me. I've been getting a lot of calls from these clowns lately, and I wasn't really interested in being interrupted, so he really got it from me. I should have probably just left the thing recorded. It would have been interesting because I let loose just an absolute tirade of profanity on the guy, and he obviously doesn't know how to curse in English very well, so he got himself all tongue-tied trying to curse me back. It didn't work out so well. But where was I? Well, as I said, obviously I'm an automotive mechanic, and quite often we're called on to measure things of such small proportions that we're not capable of doing as human beings unaided. So I can measure things down to 1/2 of 1/1000th of 1 inch, for instance. And this is quite important, actually. In modern vehicle engines, a couple of thousandths of an inch can actually spell doom for an engine. Similarly, I can measure things in electronics down to very small amounts, such as 1/1000th of 1 ampere, or the same in resistance and voltages. And of course, I'm not capable of measuring these things myself. I've got tools that do that, and the tools do it very well, and they do it repeatably. And so it's not just enough to say, well, you're dealing with angles of less than 1 degree. What you'd have to do is demonstrate that we have an inability to measure those things accurately. And they've certainly not done that. I think if Fernieboy were to investigate, do a little research on that, he'd probably find that we can measure those angles fairly, down to under 1 degree and beyond that pretty accurately to within some percentage of error, and that percentage, I would guess, is probably pretty small. So, not a refutation, right? Another thing is, Fernieboy talks in his video towards the end, getting close to the end, about this being some sort of a spiritual battle, and that Cool Hard Logic and atheist trolls are defending spiritual positions. And I think in order to make that assertion, at least realistically, one of at least 2 things would need to be in evidence to do that effectively. One would be some sort of admission or declaration by cool hard logic that he is defending a spiritual position, or that he even believes in spirituality or in a spirit realm or any such thing. Now, I could be wrong. I'm just assuming that cool hard logic is some sort of an evidential naturalist or something, just based on his videos. One should be careful, I guess, about doing that with atheists, because we don't really know. Atheism only tells you, or an atheist, the label atheist only tells you one thing about a person. But I think that's a fair assumption. A great deal of atheists deny spirituality or the spirit realm itself. The other way, or the other thing that would need to be demonstrated by Fernie Boy to make this assertion would be some sort of a demonstration that there isn't even such a thing as a spiritual position or a spirit realm or spirituality. And of course, that's not happening. So, again, this isn't an argument. These are just assertions, and they're empty assertions. Now, on sort of a final point here, I guess, Fernie Boy also asks, or sort of says, when he's talking about the trolls and he's talking about cool hard logic, that all these atheists really want to attack Christians. And geez, if you want to attack something that you say doesn't exist, why don't you attack the tooth fairy or leprechauns or something? And I mean, of course, this is a silly argument. It's been gone over a million times. I don't know why I really need to go over it here, but I will for the sake of dealing with this video. Obviously, we don't have leprechauns at the root of legislation, right? We don't have lawmakers trying to make laws or deny people freedoms based on leprechaunism, right? And certainly in the more repressive countries, where the tenets of the religion dictate, right, the social construct. They dictate what laws are on the books, and some even want to institute law that comes directly from their own scriptures. And, you have no such thing coming from Easter bunnies or leprechauns or flying spaghetti monsters or anything else. The reason that people rail against, especially the monotheistic based religions, is because you've got a religious group that's instituting laws, and they're actually very effective at it. So there's a real reason behind it. It's called bigotry, in case you didn't know, Fernie Boy. And again, I find this ironic, all this whining and crying about atheists trolling poor Christians, and why aren't they going after the leprechauns, from a guy who's had videos removed from YouTube for what is essentially hate speech against gays and lesbians. That's why, Fernie Boy. I've seen also in the comments section on my Fernie Boy videos some discussion about whether these things even warrant a response. And I see some that say no and some that say yes. And, I sort of understand both camps. I'm not trying to be a politician here, but I get it. Cool Hard Logic has kind of gone on record as saying he does believe they deserve a response. And he's had, certainly when it comes to geocentrism, the best responses I've ever seen. And I think it is important because it's not Fernie Boy that we're actually talking to here. I think that's the important thing to remember. It's the innocent bystander. It's the people who are not leaving comments in the comments sections, but maybe just watching the videos and making a quiet conclusion to themselves after taking in all the evidence. And if somebody were sort of susceptible to this spiritual message that Fernie Boy gives, and then were to go and watch a Cool Hard Logic video, I have to think that there would at least be some pause for concern there and say, well, wait a minute, And I guess that's why I make the videos that I do when it comes to the argumentation side of things, is I really want to make it clear that, when I see a video that says Cool Hard Logic Exposed, I expect to see some certain things in that video. Well, I don't really, because I know the source. But I mean, really, that's what the title would lead us towards. And the same thing if somebody is going to make an argument and they say, I have refuted this. Well, you expect to see some logical argumentation presented with some facts and evidence behind it. But of course, when it comes to Fernie Boy, there's none of that there. And I think it's very, very, very important to point that out. You've got to separate the spiritual talk and the emotional language from the empirical and the evidential arguments and the logic. And I think it's important to point that out. None of this is really for Fernie Boy.
Now, I also understand the other camp who says these things don't warrant a response, because really the guy is a lost dude. So we can't fix Fernie Boy, right? It's just not going to happen. And so I completely get that, and I agree. But again, none of this is for him. He's not a real evidence-based guy, right? So that none of this is going to work, and I understand that. Fernie Boy, evidence isn't really your bag, right? I mean, not anything really beyond flying RC helicopters off the hood of a moving Dodge Dakota, which, by the way, I don't recommend, actually. You have not demonstrated the intellectual or technical prowess that I would say would be required to operate 2 motor vehicles simultaneously. So I don't recommend that. I think I would, if I were you, I'd either fly the RC helicopter or drive the Dodge Dakota, but don't do both at the same time. I'd hate to see something, as much as we've battled on the message boards and comment sections, I'd hate to see something bad happen to you. Thanks everyone for watching. Have a great evening.